ousted former president.
Was the idea that it was only through new digital and social media that networks were forming, and that networks of participation, participatory networks, were forming in the MENA region. There was a lot of rhetoric that we were hearing both in the media and in academic scholarship, which seemed to suggest a very techno-optimistic narrative about how young people through social media were gaining access to democracy. And we wanted to question this automatic link between democracy and young people. My name is Dr. Shakuntala Banerjee, and I work in the Media and Communications Department at the LSE. A couple of years ago, I had the real honor of working on a project with the LSE's Middle East Centre entitled Personalised Media and Participatory Culture. And this project was conceived alongside a colleague of mine, Dr. Mohamed Ibareen, in American University, Sharjah. We both had for some years been thinking along similar lines about the ways in which young people interact with and use new media and technologies to be creative and to participate in a variety of social and civic movements across the Middle East. And we thought at that point that it would be interesting to make an intervention in research, to do some kind of more in-depth anthropological work. Overall, we interviewed more than 80 young people from a number of different organizations. The countries we looked at were Morocco, Tunisia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. We found things in three main areas. The first one being gender, the second one being around the intersection of new media and social class in the MENA region, and the third one being around the intersection of participation and new media. There is a sort of optimistic myth that your identity in online environments is somehow less relevant than your identity in offline environments. Our interviewees, for instance, the group of young women gamers in Tunisia, encountered enormous amounts of everyday sexism. They encountered this amongst gaming communities within their local community in offline environments. They hoped that by being excellent gamers and going into competitions in online environments where their identity as a woman was not at the forefront, it would enable them to somehow escape from the gendered violence and the misogyny that they encountered offline. But actually, in some instances, the international community of gamers coming in with their usual sexist jokes and put-downs against these young women. The second thing to say was that none of this was absolutely unique to the Middle East and North Africa. It was something about the online environment, rather, which is something that you could say was happening in the West, in Europe, in America. It wasn't something that was just about that region. Moving on to talk about social class, myself and our researcher, Cristina Moreno Almeida, had the view that class was going to come out as quite a significant factor in shaping who did and didn't use the internet and the ways in which the internet was used, which shaped the kinds of spaces that young people had for civic engagement, shaped online spaces too. And the idea somehow that young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, just because mobile and smartphones had come into the region, was suddenly enabled to participate in democracy to the same extent and the same level as their upper middle class and middle class peers was really not something that we found. And here we can say quite conclusively that the internet was really not the key to participatory networks. What was key to participatory networks was the interest groups and the imagined communities that young people who had been building for a number of years. So for instance, in our Moroccan teachers network, young teachers, trainee teachers network, there were meetings which were entirely offline. Although WhatsApp might have played some kind of a role in the organization of the time and the place of the meeting wasn't taking place online. This was a group that had founded itself completely in an offline environment, and unless we were in very, very elite environments, this was pretty much the pattern that we found across the 4 countries. The first thing to say would be that you cannot generalize something about the Arab region or the Arab mentality or the Arab use of media. And it is a generalization that I think has dogged our field and is really, really problematic. The second thing to say was that many young people have started to distrust the environments that they're in digital media. The third thing to say is the pressure comes with being always visible in new media. And many of the more elite young people who were very socially visible and who became what you might say as an internet sensation or somebody who was always in the public eye online have now withdrawn from that position because it is both exhausting as well as you end up burning out if you're always visible, always on call and always on duty online. I could list a lot of limitations of our study, but it's very difficult to map organizations that have deliberately tried to stay under the radar. A second limitation, which I was very aware of, was that we were not moving out into the countryside enough. And a third thing I would say is that one would just love to have much longer, to be funded for a longer time, to remain in situ, and to do a much deeper ethnographic study, which didn't conclude in 4 or 5 months, but which went on for a couple of years, which looked at major events as they intersected the everyday lives of young people, rather than simply reflecting on those major events through the accounts of young people. Fantastic.